I checked the paper that you turned in last night, and all of the entries in your literature review is wrong. I mean, look at this. The citations are nearly non-existent. Now all of the entries are plagiarized. You're gonna have to rework all of this. Oh, there you are. Okay. My name is Sir Vince. Now I'm one of the research specialists here at the Christian Colleges. And for today, we'll be talking about the ethical standards in writing the literature review of your paper. Before we begin to discuss what those ethical standards are, let us determine first, what exactly is a literature review? What is it all about? Okay, so when we say a literature review, this is the part of your paper in which you, as the researcher, examines the different concepts that are related to your paper. And this is a very important part of your paper because everything that you will use as a reference to your paper should be cited here in your literature review. Even if it's just a one-sentence text that you've used, you have to properly cite it in your literature review. Now I know what you're thinking of. Why do we need to do this? Okay, why do we need to construct a literature review of our paper? It is because you, as the researcher, you need to determine the connection of your study with the current situation in the world, as well as to different studies as well. You also need to understand the other ideas, whether prominent or underlying within your paper. And lastly, you need to construct the literature review because you need to obtain more or further information that are related to your paper. Now we got it out of the way, let us proceed with the different ethical standards that we need to follow. Okay, so this doesn't come as a surprise actually, because in every phase of the research process there are what we call rules that we need to follow. And these rules are translated into what we call ethical standards. So you can think of this as the do's and don'ts in writing your paper. For this part, these are the do's and don'ts on how you're going to construct the literature review of your paper. Namely, there are three ethical standards that you need to follow. First is you need to avoid plagiarism. Next is you always have to use formal language in your paper. And the third one is you have to avoid committing fraudulent acts. What exactly is plagiarism? So when we say plagiarism, you are presenting someone else's work without proper consent. Sometimes there is no consent at all. And sometimes you are presenting someone else's work without any acknowledgement or without proper acknowledgement whatsoever. And under plagiarism, there are various forms of it. Okay, so the first one, I believe everyone is very well aware of this. We have what we call verbatim plagiarism. When we say verbatim plagiarism, this is word per word plagiarism, as in you've lifted the text directly from the source and you have put them in your paper without any citation and or acknowledgement whatsoever. So next, aside from that, we have what we call the cutting and pasting from internet sources. And I believe everyone is very well aware of this. Now, this is traditionally called copy-paste or Control-C, Control-V. Okay? So, like verbatim plagiarism, you highlight a certain text on the internet article that you have found. Okay? Hit Control-C on your keyboard, go to your paper, and hit Control-V on your part of the paper. Okay? Next is, we call this improper paraphrasing. Now, I believe everyone's familiar with this. When you make a paper or when you cite or when you acknowledge someone in your paper, you have to paraphrase the original text. But in paraphrasing, there are certain techniques that you have to follow. And if you have improperly followed those techniques in paraphrasing, you already fall guilty of plagiarism. Next, we have what we call collusion. When we say collusion, let's say you are conniving or you are collaborating with other people. Let's say you are conniving or you are collaborating with fellow researchers to commit plagiarism acts. So if you do this, again, you will fall guilty of plagiarism. Next, we have what we call inaccurate citation. Remember, boys and girls, whenever citing a text, there are three things that you need to mention in your cited text. First is the name of the author. Next, you have to cite the name of the article, the book, or whatever material that you have gotten your text from. And the third one is you have to state the copyright year. All of those three things need to be present in your cited text. If any of those are missing in your cited text, then you fall guilty of improper citation, which relates to plagiarism as well. Next is failure to acknowledge assistance. In the field of research, you have to get used to this. We are very particular with citations and acknowledgements and such, and these can come from everywhere, okay? Everything, including everyone. An example, let's say you have spoken with an expert regarding your paper. You have put what you have discussed in your paper, but you did not mention that you have spoken with this person prior to putting that part in your paper. If you do that, you are already guilty of plagiarism. You have to cite whatever it is that you have discussed or whatever it is that you have found. Or simply put, you have to cite whatever it is that you have to put in your paper. So next one is use of material written by professional people or professional organizations without proper authorization and without proper permission. So let's say you have decided to use another paper from another well-known researcher. You've just used their paper without properly acknowledging them, nor did you even ask permission from them. If you do that act, again, you are guilty of plagiarism. Next, we have what we call auto-plagiarism. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can you plagiarize automatically? Or how can you plagiarize yourself? I'll give an example. Let's say you have finished a paper from last school year and you have decided to use the contents of it in your paper. If you do that, you are guilty of self-plagiarism. You have to at least cite yourself, or you need to ask permission from your previous research advisor if you can use the contents of your previous paper with your current paper.